The implementation process is a really important part of any new client that we're onboarding. The purpose of implementation is to understand the client's requirements and how we can deliver the service that we're selling to them. I see it as a really important part of the journey because we have to ensure that we get the process completely correct and are understanding the client's requirements exactly as they need so that we can service them in the correct way. Sometimes the implementation process can fall over slightly, and it can be for various reasons. It can sit with the implementation team internally ourselves. We could do something incorrectly, or it can sit heavily with the client. There's lots of things you have to consider, and it depends on the complexity of what the client's asking for. So we ensure that we do several layers of testing when we are implementing a new system for a client, and make sure that everything is set up as agreed with the client before we would allow them to go live. Unfortunately, there are shortfalls on the client side sometimes where perhaps they haven't considered something, or there could be a delay in getting some information over to us, which would naturally cause a delay in the process. Something in particular that causes delays from the client's perspective is speaking to the correct stakeholder. So what we try and do is, as early on in the process, is to ensure that we are speaking with the correct stakeholders from the beginning, and that could be various different roles within the business. We'd always like to have somebody from finance involved, someone from the HR team. Generally speaking, procurement teams are involved, and it's always good to have a traveller's input as well, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that will actually be utilising the service firsthand. Yeah, I think sometimes if they're not involving the traveller or the travel bookers at the implementation stage, they're actually doing themselves an injustice, because at the end of the day, they are going to be the end user of the technology that we roll out for them, or the service in general that we are providing. So it's always vital to have one of those stakeholders involved so that we're seeing it from all angles. Generally speaking, there isn't an exact timescale of any implementation because we treat each one bespoke, depending on what the client requires. So it depends on the complexity, again, of what the client actually needs. And if there's an online booking tool that we are delivering to them, obviously that could take slightly longer than if we were just offering a traditional offline service. There's lots of considerations that you need to take into consideration. Given that we pride ourselves in the human touch element, we are always really keen to get clients trading with us as quickly as possible. So even if we are offering an online booking tool as the solution to the client, we're always keen to start the client trading with us as soon as possible. Therefore, if the client is ready to do so, we would let them start trading with us straight away, and really home in on that service piece that we are offering them. It almost gives them that element of trying before they buy as such, and they really get to know our teams and the quality of the service that we deliver to them. As part of the implementation process, we always encourage traveller profiles to be created at that time of implementing the client. We put that on the client themselves to ensure that that data that they're providing us is 100% correct. And we always, where possible, will encourage them to enrol anyone in the business that could potentially travel later down the line, just so that we've already got their traveller profile set up and that we won't face any blockers down the line. In terms of the data that we capture, that's why we are always ensuring that we've got the correct stakeholders involved from the beginning of the implementation process to make sure that they're all aligned internally. The finance team need to be speaking to the procurement team. We need to make sure that the data's matching exactly as they need it to come out the other end. Some clients are quite open-minded. They might not have anything in place when we are presenting them with an implementation plan. So sometimes we guide them by what we would recommend they capture, so such as PO numbers, client reference numbers, job numbers. And again, it's about making sure that we have the correct stakeholders involved to make sure that the information that we are capturing is relevant to all departments within the business. Something that we've learned over time, and I stand by it, is the more complex an approval flow is, the more problems that it causes. So I would always recommend, where possible, to have an approval flow that's not too complex, and to ensure that the people that are approving the trips are aware of that process as well, to avoid any delays when it comes to having an approval process in place. The most delays or the problems that can be caused is if you've got multiple approvers, sorry. So if you've got a double layer of approval, that generally will cause problems because you need to make sure that both approvers are going to approve that trip. Again, as part of the implementation process, it's really important that you get buy-in from the travellers, the travel bookers, and anybody that will be utilising our services. So I think it's about the delivery and how we propose it to the client. So we get heavily involved in training the teams, the users that will be utilising our services, and that in itself will get the buy-in from them. So again, that's where it's important to make sure we've got the correct stakeholders involved from the beginning, so that we've got that buy-in, and we will literally hold their hands if they need it, to make sure that they're all comfortable with the process and that they're all aware of what needs to be done to ensure that things are being booked in a timely manner. What we would understand with the client at the beginning of the process is who needs to be involved. So if we are talking about a group of EAs and PAs that will be booking on behalf of others, we need them involved from the beginning. That ultimately will get their buy-in, and we can then work with them to make sure that they're really comfortable with the process that we're putting in place and that it works for them as well. They're ultimately going to be the ones that are utilising our services more than others, so it's really important for them to have an opinion and be part of that process. When it comes to communicating with the client, we would always recommend that we work with them to build some comms that will go out internally to prepare their staff for the changes that are coming. And then as gradually, dependent on the solution that we're offering them, would actually depend on the extent of the comms that needs to go out. If we're offering a completely offline service, you're not going to need as much communication to that business as you would if they're utilising booking tools as such. So again, it's a case-by-case basis, but we would work with the client to ensure that they were comfortable with the communication piece. And more often than not, we actually would write that comms piece with them, just explaining the purpose, the benefits of why they're coming on board with us. I can't say that comes up very often. Obviously, some businesses probably have procedures in place that they have to communicate with the wider business in a certain way. We would always encourage our involvement. At the end of the day, we're the specialists in that area. We know what we're talking about. It makes sense for us to have an input in that comms piece. So as part of my remit, we actually look after the client for the first 6 to 9 months of trading. So when that implementation journey begins, my team are responsible to ensure that the solution we are delivering is exactly what's been agreed during that period of time. Once the client then goes live, that client sits within my team for that initial 6 to 9 months of trading, just so we can make sure that they're happy with everything, everything's working as it should be, before we hand it over to the account management team. So we look after that client for the initial trading period to make sure that they're being handed over to the account management team in a really good place, and also in case anything needed to be tweaked along the way. So we can sit and make a plan and roll it out, but there's always going to be instances whereby something hasn't quite worked how we thought it would. On both sides that can happen. So we use that period of time just to make sure that we're 100% happy and that the client's happy as well. So we get them in a really good place before handing them over to the account management team. No, so within my team, we have what we call front book account management, and that is for that initial trading period. And it works really well because it just allows us to iron out anything that may prop up during that time, so that we're handing the client over to account management in a really good place. It keeps the client happy and it keeps our teams happy as well. Yeah, so with travel policies, there's always going to be some travellers that are an exception to the rule. So again, we build that as part of the approval process, part of that booking flow. Again, that can cause delays, because if you've got a separate approval flow for a list of, I don't know, travellers that are exempt from the main policy, you're making it more complicated because you're almost adding another layer in again. But it does come up a lot because there's always going to be travellers that are exempt from the main policy. Yeah, absolutely. So when we meet with a client, one of the first things we will ask during that implementation process is, can we have your travel policy? If that client has never used a travel management company before, chances are they may not have one, or it may be that they've got a historic travel policy within the business that's not actually up to date or relevant. So my team would work with them to build that policy out to make sure that it's relevant for the here and now, and then as an ongoing piece, the account management team would then be responsible to make sure that that policy still remains relevant. Each travel policy is unique, and dependent on the company, it may be that they have separate travel policies within that policy for different user groups. So as part of that implementation process, we're responsible to build that as per the client's requirements. If we can, as I say, we will always have an input in what that travel policy looks like. A client may have a very well polished travel policy, but we might actually have some suggestions that we would recommend to tweak it slightly to make it more relevant and up to date with the current market that we're working with. That's not something that's come up very often. I do think that it's going to become more of a thing moving forward. But as it stands, it's not a major topic that we come across, but I definitely think we'll be seeing it more and more. Yeah, I think again, it's managing clients' expectations, and it's all about how we deliver it to a client. We have to be really transparent of what the capabilities of our technology offer, versus what element is that human interaction. So we have to manage the client's expectations to ensure that they're not disappointed with the offering, or they expect that there's more capabilities than the actual systems can offer. We do have some bespoke technology, which is our own technology that we build and manage in-house. We do also work with third parties to provide technology that offers solutions that we couldn't possibly manage ourselves. So we have a combination of both within the business, which does provide us with a USP when we're going out to clients, because it's our own bit of kit and nobody else can offer that to them. Absolutely. So one of the systems that we use internally is our own piece of kit. And with that, we have several clients that utilize it in different ways. So it's not an out of the box solution as such. We would work with the client to understand what they need from that system to build it around their model. In terms of reporting, we have to agree with the client what information they need to see, and we encourage that that is captured from the minute they go live, to keep that consistency and to make sure that they've got no gaps in the data that we're providing them. So it's really important that that is agreed as soon as possible. That being said, we are always evolving things. Clients have requirements that may change later down the line. So that's why we work really closely with them, just to make sure that everything remains relevant. And if they need to capture anything else, we'd work with them to agree when the right time would be to bring that in. So for example, the beginning of a new month would be a really good cut-off if they needed to change some of the data input that they're capturing. But ultimately we would try and encourage to have everything in place from the minute they're starting trading with us, just to keep it clean and ensure that they're not missing any data. Yeah, so back to what I said regarding having the correct stakeholders involved, we need to make sure we're talking to the right people from the beginning so that they are communicating internally to make sure that they're all on board with what we agree from a data perspective as to what we're capturing. Most of the time it comes down heavily to the finance team because it depends how they're reconciling in the background. So we need to make sure that we are capturing everything that they need to make their lives easier, because ultimately that's what we're there to do. In terms of integration, that's a big part of our offering nowadays, and more and more we're being asked for more integration on different systems. The biggest one I would say are HR systems. So we have a lot of clients that require an integration piece with their internal HR system. And again, where possible, finance systems, is there a way that we can work with them to integrate something that makes that process smoother for them? We want to make their lives easier, so we would work with them on a case-by-case basis, ensuring that it works for them as a business. As a sales team, when we are proposing our solution to a client, we need them to understand that it's not just about we're charging you a transaction fee to book this service for you. It's the value that goes way beyond that we need to really make them understand. So our buying power, for instance, we are fortunate that we're in a position that we have great buying power, so we pass those savings on to our client. So to them, they might think, well, if I booked it myself, I'm not going to pay that transaction fee. But little do they know, we have access to more favourable airfares, hotel rates, that they're getting much more than just purchasing a product through us. We pass everything on to the client to give them the best value. One thing that we face time and time again, especially if we're dealing with clients that have never used a travel management company before, to them they may think, if I booked it myself, I wouldn't have to pay anything. I can just go online and book that myself. We offer much more than that. It's the service, and we always talk about it because it's our value. The human touch is so important within the travel industry, and more often than not, it only becomes apparent when a client has been in a situation where something's gone wrong. That's when they will really see the true value. So it's the way we deliver that to a client and really truly make them understand the benefits of utilising a TMC. It's not as simple as I could book it myself and I could get it this price. We are offering a service. We're not just selling products to them. From the minute we start initial discussions with a client, we really have to tell them the value that they are getting by utilising us as a travel management company. At the end of the day, everyone thinks they're a travel agent nowadays, and that's just not the case. More often than not, you'll find people are going onto the likes of Skyscanner and, oh, I found it for this price, but actually when they go through the process, it's not that price. They need to understand the value of what we're offering, and like I've said before, we are offering a service. We're not just selling a product. It's the whole picture. We really have to make sure that we get that across to the client and that they fully understand what that means. We would always have an implementation process regardless of what solution we're offering to the client. We have a combination of different services that we offer. So we have your traditional offline servicing, which is just pick up the phone, send an email to the team, you're speaking with a human, you're dealing with a human. We have an online booking tool whereby travellers, travel bookers can go on and book their own travel. And we have our bespoke booking tool that we manage in-house as well. So ultimately, we have 3 different solutions that we offer to a client. It's not as simple as just saying, here you go, there's the online booking tool, get going with it. We personally bespoke each solution dependent on the client. We work with them from the beginning of that journey to make sure that everything is set up to work for their business. as I say, we're there to make their lives easier, not make it more difficult. So we really need to understand what they are trying to achieve to make sure that we're delivering the right product for them. There's definitely a lot of room for automation, more so in the background in terms of when we're reporting and from a financial perspective especially. The more automation that we can offer, it just makes things more efficient and saves time ultimately. But there is always need for that human element, and I will stand by that. The makeup of travel is going to change a lot over the next few years, I believe, especially with AI and the encouragement of more automation. But there are certain things that just can't be automated, and that's why we offer with any of our clients, regardless of whether they're using an online booking tool or having a traditional offline service, we will always give them access to a team. But I definitely think there is a huge amount of opportunity for automation, but it's more behind the scenes rather than front facing. If travellers are allowed to just book for themselves without having any process in place, from a duty of care perspective, that's dangerous to the business because they don't have control of knowing where their travellers are at any moment in time. And if people are booking with different suppliers constantly and not having a single source of information, there's no way of them being able to tell where their travellers are. So I think in that respect, traveller tracking, duty of care is a huge piece in that area. But again, it comes down to the leakage and managing the spend of the client. If we are, say for instance, we roll out and implement a new client and they come on board tomorrow, we would encourage that everyone within that business is utilising us as a TMC, because the minute you start getting people booking outside of that, you lose control. You can't control what you're spending, you can't control where those travellers are, you don't know what they're booking. So again, we would always home in on the fact that if you're coming on board with us, everybody's got to buy into it. And that's why we work really closely with all stakeholders from the beginning right the way through to getting them on board. Absolutely. And when you're booking point to point, that's absolutely fine. An app's fine for that, and an online booking tool works really well in that area. If somebody's got more complex requirements, we would always encourage them to talk to an agent, because at the end of the day, they're the specialists, they know what they're looking for, and the way that airfares work, especially nowadays, they're quite complex in the background. So we would always encourage that human interaction. Speak to a specialist, they know what they're doing.